Hello, my name is Pastor Kathy Kollar. I'm the pastor of Pleasant Valley Lutheran Church near Malabar Farm and St. Paul Lutheran Church in Lucas, Ohio. Greetings. We are reading through the Bible with commentary. We are in the book of Numbers, fourth book of the Bible. The Israelites have left Egypt, have gone to Mount Sinai, have gotten all kinds of directions, have gotten to the edge of the promised land and said, oh no, we can't do that. Even though God would help us, no, God wouldn't help us. And rebelled, and are now have been traveling around for 40 years, and the older generation have all died off, and they're on the brink of going into the promised land. And yesterday we read about the Midianites being defeated and them counting all the booty afterward, and now we're going to have more war. So chapter 32 of Numbers. Now the Reubenites and the Gadites owned a very great number of cattle, which is interesting yesterday with all the booty, the plunder, which was thousands and thousands of oxen and sheep. So the Gadites own a great number of cattle. When they saw that the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead was a good place for cattle, the Gadites and the Reubenites spoke to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the congregation. So everybody, all the ruler people are gathered together and they speak to them. Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Namrah, Heshbah, Eliala. I always tell my congregation, if you don't pronounce it correctly, it's okay. This was 3,000 years ago in a different language. We probably don't pronounce it anywhere near the way they did, but we're going to do our best. And my Bible has little diacritical marks, and it actually makes it harder sometimes for me to read them. Eliala, Sebum, Nebo, and Beon. The land that the Lord subdued before the congregation of Israel is a land for cattle, and your servants have cattle. They continued, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for possession. Do not make us cross the Jordan. So we don't actually want to go into the promised land. We want to settle over here on the other side of the Jordan. And I think it's interesting because I'm currently in Montana, and this is a land for cattle. But Moses said to the Gadites and the Reubenites, shall your brothers go to war while you sit here? Why will you discourage the hearts of the Israelites from going over into the land that the Lord has given them? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. When they went up to the Wadi Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the hearts of the Israelites from going into the land that the Lord had given them. The Lord's anger was kindled on that day, and he swore, saying, surely none of the people who came out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, because they have not unreservedly followed me, none except Caleb son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, and Joshua son of Nun, for they have unreservedly followed the Lord. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord had disappeared. Moses is not too happy. And now you, a brood of sinners. That sounds like John the Baptist and how he used to talk. Have risen in place of your fathers to increase the Lord's fierce anger against Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all this people. He's like, this happened last time. They didn't want to go in the land, and everybody revolted, and it was bad. They said to him, verse 16, they came up to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our flocks and towns for our little ones, but we will take up arms as a vanguard before the Israelites. We have a footnote on vanguard, hurrying before the Israelites. So they're saying, we're going to go in the front. We're not only going to go with you and fight and go to war with you, we're going to go in the front before the Israelites until we have brought them to their place. Meanwhile, our little ones will stay in the fortified towns because of the inhabitants of the land. So they killed everybody, but not everybody, and they're going to build sheepfolds and leave the little ones behind. We will not return to our homes until all the Israelites have obtained their inheritance. We will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on this side of the Jordan to the east. Verse 20. So Moses said to them, if you do this, if you take up arms to go before the Lord for the war, and all of you who bear arms cross the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then after that you may return and be free of the obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you do not do this, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Build towns for your little ones, and folds for your flocks, but do what you have promised. It's like, okay, you can do that, but if you don't, you'll be sinning, and if you sin, and this great line, be sure your sin will find you out. I feel like I've heard that before somewhere. And sin nowadays, we don't like to talk about sin, but we still do have problems with sin. And we have a society where sin is like, yeah, whatever they do. But sin is still a thing, and it still will find you out in the sense of you still have to stand before God that you have and say, you have done what you have done. And sin isn't always just the big things like, oh, I've never murdered anybody. Yes, well, but if you're self-centered, as I certainly am, or proud, as I certainly can be, or just human basically, then your sin does find you out eventually. So just a random thought there. Build little towns for your little ones, your folds for your flocks, but do what you have promised. Verse 25, Then the Gadites and the Reubenites said to Moses, Your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our little ones, our wives, our flocks, and all our livestock shall remain there in the towns of Gilead, but your servants will cross over, everyone armed for war, to do battle for the Lord, just as my Lord orders. I feel like they could leave some of the other flocks behind too. Probably not. They'll probably take them all. So Moses gave command concerning them to Eleazar the priest, to Joshua son of Nun, and to the heads of the ancestral houses of the Israelite tribes. And Moses said to them, If the Gadites and the Reubenites, everyone armed for battle before the Lord, will cross over the Jordan with you, and the land shall be subdued before you, then you shall give them the land of Gilead for possession. Because Moses is about to be gone, so he has to give all these commands to Joshua and Caleb and Eleazar to take care of it while he's gone, after he's gone. So if the Gadites and the Reubenites, everyone are for battle before the Lord, will cross over the Jordan with you, and the land will be subdued before you, then you shall give them the land of Gilead for a possession. But if they will not cross over with you armed, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. So, and sometimes I think we forget that Gilead was technically a separate land. There's this old song, there's a balm in Gilead, but Gilead was across the Jordan. Of course, Israel wasn't just from the Jordan to the Mediterranean. It splashed over on the other side, obviously, because of Gilead. But if they will not cross over, I think we just read that. Verse 30, but if they will not cross over with you armed, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. The Gadites and the Reubenites answered, As the Lord has spoken to your servants, so we will do. We will cross over armed before the Lord into the land of Canaan, but the possession of our inheritance shall remain with us on this side of the Jordan. So you have to say it many times, and when you say it many times, that's a cultural thing. Americans tend to be very direct. Do you want this? No. Okay. Other cultures you have to ask a couple of, are you sure you don't want it? Surely you want it. And the third time, then they'll say, okay, yes, I would like to have that. So cultural differences can show up in very odd ways sometimes. Verse 33, Moses gave to them, to the Gadites and to the Reubenites, and half-tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of King Sihon of the Amorites, and kingdom of King Og of Bashan, the land of it and its towns, with its territories of the surrounding towns. And the Gadites built Dibon, Ataroth, Aroer, Atroth-Shophan, Jazer, Jogbehan, Beth-Nimram, and Beth-Haran, fortified cities and folds for sheep. So they're building cities and sheepfolds. And the Reubenites rebuilt Heshbon, Eliala. After they destroyed them and burned them all down, they're rebuilding them. Kiriathaim, Nebo, and Baal-Meon. some names being changed, and Sibmah. And they gave names to the towns that they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Gilead, captured it, and dispossessed the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Gilead to Machir, son of Manasseh, and he settled there. Jair of Manasseh went and captured their villages and renamed them Havoth Jair. In other words, my village, his villages of Jair. Sure enough, that's what it means. And Nabah went and captured Kenath and its villages, and renamed it Nobah after himself. And before you think, well, why are they naming cities after themselves? Guess what we did here in the United States? And we wander around and we see such and such ville, because that was the name of so-and-so that settled the town there. And I've seen lots of cities like that. Chapter 33. These are the stages by which the Israelites went out of the land of Egypt in military formation under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. Some of these feel, well, no, this is more like a summary. I was going to say it's repetitive, but actually it's more of a summary of what we just read over the last course of this book of Numbers. Moses wrote down their starting points stage by stage and by command of the Lord, and these are their stages according to their starting places. They set out from Ramesses in the first month. On the 15th day of the first month, on the day after the Passover, the Israelites went out boldly in the sight of all the Egyptians, while the Egyptians were burying all their firstborn, whom the Lord had struck down among them. The Lord executed judgments even against their gods. Verse 5. So the Israelites set out from Ramesses and camped at Succoth. They set out from Succoth and camped at Etham, which is on the edge of the wilderness. They set out from Etham and turned back to Piahiroth, which faces Baal-zephon, and they camped before Migdol. They set out from Piahiroth, passed through the sea into the wilderness, went a 3 days' journey into the wilderness of Etham, and camped at Marah. They set out from Marah and came to Elim. At Elim there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there. They set out from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They set out from the Red Sea and camped by the wilderness of Sin. They set out from the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dophkah. They set out from Dophkah and camped at Elash. They set out from Elash and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They set out from Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from the wilderness of Sinai and camped at Kibroth-Hattaavah. This is a shout out to my editor, Kristopher, who is going to have to look up every single one of these cities will probably look up all of these cities to make sure that the captions are at least close. They set out from Kibroth-Hattaavah and camped at Hazeroth. They set out from Hazeroth and camped at Rithmah. One with a lip. Rithmah. They set out from Rithmah and camped at Rimmon Perez. They set out from Rimmon Perez and camped at Libnah. They set out from Libnah and camped at Rissah. They set out from Rissah and camped at Kehelathah. Yes, you should be laughing at me. If you're not, you should be. Kehelathah. They set out from Kehelathah. You get to say it twice, but the second time you get the hang of it. Kehelathah, and camped at Mount Shefer. They set out from Mount Shefer and camped at Harada. They set out from Harada and camped at Mehilah. They set out from Mehilah and camped at Tahath. They set out from Tahath and camped at Terah. They set out from Terah and camped at Mithkah. They set out from Mithkah and camped at Hashmonah. They set out from Hashmonah and camped at Mosirath. They set out from Mosirath and camped at Ben-Jayakan. They set out from Ben-Jayakan and camped at Horhagid. No, it's not Hagrid. Horhagidgad. Oh my gosh. Horhagidgad. They set out from Horhagidgad and camped at Jotbathah. They set out from Jotbathah and camped at Obrana. They set out Obrana and camped at Ezion-Geber. They set out from Ezion-Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin, that is Kadesh. They set out from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor at the edge of the land of Edom. And of course, this is 3,000 years ago, and we do not know where any of those places, well, very few of those places do we have any idea where they are. They're somewhere in the land, somewhere between Egypt and Canaan, which is mostly wilderness. It really is a desert, but there's areas that are slightly better. Verse 38. Aaron the priest went up on Mount Hor at the command of the Lord and died there in the 40th year after the Israelites had come out of the land of Egypt on the first day of the 5th month. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. So he knew he was going to die, and he climbed a mountain, and then he died, which is, if you're 123 years old and you can still climb a mountain, but then that would kill you, wouldn't it? No, anyway. For whatever reason, for however way it worked, he went up on Mount Hor to die. Verse 40, the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who lived in the Negev in the land of Canaan, heard the coming of the Israelites. They set out from Mount Hor and camped at Zalmonah. They set out from Zalmonah and camped at Punon. They set out from Punon and camped at Oboth. They set out from Oboth and camped at Ayabarim, in the territory of Moab. They set out from Ayin. Oh, you said it shortly. You shortened it that time. Ayin, and camped at Dibengad. They set out from Dibengad and camped at Almandiblah. Oh my, Almandiblathaim. They set out from Almandiblathaim and camped in the mountains of Abarim before Nebo. They set out from the mountains of Abarim and camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. They camped by the Jordan from Beth Jerishmoth as far as Abel Shittim in the plains of Moab, because there's a lot of them, so they spread out, I'm guessing. And it's interesting because these are very old, odd names from Aramaic and Hebrew and very hard for me to pronounce. And yesterday, as I was looking at Little Bighorn, and they fought Native Americans, and they took all of the Native American names and converted them into English. And part of me thought they shouldn't have done that. They had names in their language, and that was their name. But looking at those names, I would have done an even worse job of trying to pronounce them. I don't think I could have pronounced a single one of those names. Verse 50. In the plains of Moab, by the Jordan at Jericho, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, When you cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Destroy all their figured stones, destroy all their cast images, and demolish their high places. You shall take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land to possess. You shall apportion the land by lot according to your clans. To a large one you shall give a large inheritance, and to a small one you shall give a small inheritance. The inheritance shall belong to the person on whom the lot falls. According to your ancestral tribes you shall inherit. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then those whom you let remain shall be as barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. Barbs in your eyes, ouch. Thorns in your sides. They shall trouble you in the land where you are settling, and I will do to you as I thought to do to them. So a couple of random things. Lots, as we've said before, is a random way of selecting. So we're going to draw lots. We're not sure exactly how they did that 3,000 years ago, but it's the idea of drawing the short straw, or eeny, meeny, miny, moe, or rolling dice, or somehow determining what the will of the Lord is. And they use something called Urim and Thummim to do that. So somehow you're going to divide up the land by lots, and a larger tribe gets a larger area, smaller tribe gets a smaller area. And I'm thinking with the Gadites, Reubenites, and half tribe of Manasseh staying on the other side of the Jordan, there's even more land for the rest of the tribes to inherit. Then the second comment that I wanted to make was it said, barbs in your eyes. Yesterday my tent pole splintered, and I did not realize that fiberglass is very sharp and it leaves very awful splinters in. I still have a sore thumb from where I got a splinter in it. I didn't need a Band-Aid. It's not that bad. It just hurts. But I'm like, the thought of thorns in your side right now is like, ooh, that does hurt. and barbs in your eyes. Oof, that would be absolutely awful. And then also just the comment that the Lord is warning them, you need to get rid of all the people that are there because you're supposed to be special. You're supposed to be my holy people, the Israelites that worship me. And if you leave all of this other stuff, then they're going to start worshiping all these other gods. And the other stuff included little figured idols. It included stones that were quite phallic in nature. Included any kind of high point that would be like a little place to worship. And Israel is, parts of it are very flat. Like I'm here in Montana, and parts of it are so flat and so amazing. It's big sky country for a reason, because it's huge, and you just look for miles and miles and miles of fields of wheat. But then you come along and there's a bump, there's a feature, there's a mountain, here in this wilderness, but some kind of Bureau of Land Management land that is not flat and does not raise wheat, and so it's now become public lands that people can camp on. But it's the same kind of thing, that any kind of mountain, any kind of high place would become a place where people would go to do worship of some sort. And God is saying you need to destroy all of the stuff that they use to worship other gods and only worship me. And if you don't, then I'm going to get rid of you just like I got rid of them. So some interesting things for that. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for watching to the end. Like, subscribe, comment, but watching to the end actually is really super helpful, so thank you very much. And I did a shout out earlier to Kristopher, and just another shout out to Kristopher, who is my editor and who is taking these videos and making them and putting them on YouTube, so thank you to Kristopher. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord look at you with favor and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace. Serve the Lord. Have a great day. Thanks for being here.